Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into what should be a glorious full week of baseball. Certainly started with a bang against the Phillies at Camden Yards, and off to New York we go. Luke and I will be together over Costas. I'm going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll have the Gold Rush Sevens doublers to give away. It's been a lucky batch thus far over Coco's last week and at Cooper's down in Fells Point for Fleet Week. Fanatic weekend. It was a fantastic weekend with a PH as the Orioles rolled through. When we get together on Thursday, we also appreciate our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping my water crystal clean. As you can see, I'm drinking the orange Kool-Aid here, which I'll be doing at Costas on Thursday, as well as eating the Crab Imperial. And our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care for keeping us on the road on these wise conversation. Luke, the Orioles are in New York. You and I aren't going up here this week. Your sister's making babies, and I'm making business in crab cakes at Costas. We're going to be at Pappas next Tuesday as well. Looking forward to some great guests there. Yankees, Orioles, meaningful series for first place, mid-June. You naysayers of big series in June from months ago, now that we've had sort of a monumental weekend if you're an Orioles fan in regard to the memory timeline of you in our previous segment, like comparing it to a 21-31, a Delman Young, something that's memorable for this generation to go and say, yeah, I was there on Father's Day when they shellacked Zach Wheeler and Corbin Burns stood up and Grayson Rodriguez before that. But really, Bradish was the story of the weekend. And as I was driving down to Jamie Costello's retirement party, where all the hoi polloi were, still haven't talked to Mary Beth Marsden. I'm upset about that. But I even said to my wife, I'm like, they could sweep this weekend against the Phillies. And this Bradish thing that's now stacked on top of the Wells thing, stacked on top of the Means thing, stacked on top of the Batista thing, not necessarily an Orioles problem. We've talked about this, and we can go into Tommy John, and you can Google all that. And Luke and I have talked about this every week because every week they're losing another pitcher, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disappointing. It's odd because first day of spring training, Mike Elias announces that Kyle Bradish is dealing with a sprain to his UCL. And what did everyone think at the time? Oh, this guy's not going to pitch this year. Season over for him, Tommy John surgery, all that.
You had a
And
very long face that morning afterward. Anybody wants to go back
sure,
on YouTube,
I
take
mean,
a look at that.
and let's be clear, and I've stressed this over and over and over. These guys are not robots, and it's very easy for someone else to sit there and say, "Go get your elbow cut on." And John Means can be case study A in terms of that's not always a smooth process. So I understood all along why Kyle Bradish and or the club and anyone else that was involved in that process, which you're always going to have agents being kept in the loop, and you solicit other opinions. Sometimes you visit multiple doctors, you look at all that, and they elected to rehab, PRP injection, goes through a throwing progression. And what was ironic was it was almost what it was mid-February when Mike Elias announced that. It was almost 4 months to the date that Mike Elias had announced that Kyle Bradish wouldn't be ready for the start of the season. And he comes out on Friday night after only 74 pitches. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's been a roller coaster in terms of thinking if Kyle Bradish was going to be part of 2024 and this club that's trying to win a World Series, whether he was going to be involved or not. I think in mid-February, it felt like not. In late March, it felt like maybe. In late April, it thought, hey, so far so good. He's, rehab start assignments. Those starts are looking good. He makes his debut. First couple outings, didn't necessarily get deep into the game, but pitched well enough, looked like Kyle Bradish. We see the unbelievable outing he had in Chicago against the White Sox. We see the outing he even had last weekend against the Rays down at the Trop, where he pitched very, very well. But I think there was always, we've talked about this, the collective holding of breath with every time he pitches, with every bullpen session, with every morning after. the thought of, is this going to hold up? And I think as more time went on, there was a higher confidence level. But let's also call a spade here. From the moment we found this out in mid-February, we all knew that this was a distinct possibility, if not the most likely outcome in the full range of outcomes. So there's nothing official yet. Obviously they're going to run through all the tests. They're going to do all the imaging, probably going to see a second opinion, third opinion. That's typically how this goes. But I mean, what's the best case scenario at this point? He gets another PRP injection, rehabs for 2 months. Maybe he tries to come back in September, or is Tommy John inevitable? Point is, you're no longer expecting Kyle Bradish to be part of this 2024 club. If he makes it back and he avoids surgery somehow, some way, then we'll talk about that then. But it feels the inevitability really sunk in on Saturday when not only he goes on the IL, but they flat out say sprained.
Dude, these are such
UCL.
sad stories for these humans, right?
Right,
Like,
UCL sprain.
yeah, I can't get past that part of it. And, I'll say this about the team, because we're going to talk about Burns and where it's going to come from, right? And you were at the game Father's Day, correct? Sunday?
Yes.
So I was on the television, right? So I was on the fan feed that Greg Bader has made available to me on Masson, where he told me 18 years ago to watch the games on TV. So the pregame, which quite frankly I think stinks a lot, and I don't say that it stinks a lot, but I think it stinks. I mean, in my household, I say to my wife, I think it stinks. So I don't go on the internet and say that all the time. But when it's good, it's good. And on Sunday, it starts with Melanie Newman interviewing Jim Palmer about Father's Day, and he had a very unique situation that he found out about and wrote about and talked about in recent times, but also pitching. Also, Wheeler and Corbin Burns, how can you get a better analysis for a couple of minutes about that? And Bradish as well was part of that. And then they did this Father's Day thing, and they did Burns, McCann, Cologne, and there's somebody else that's a parent on the team. I'm missing. It was the guy on the left. I don't know any of these guys. Help me. It was a veteran, more of a veteran guy. Either way, I'll come up with it. It was four of their players. And
I didn't see it. I don't know.
yeah. It was four of their players, and it was Father's Day, and they were all fathers, and they were discussing being a father. And I'll come up with who it was, because I'm going through 25 games. I can't tell the story and think at the same time. It's like writing and thinking at the same time. I can't do it. Or talking at the same time. So they were all talking about their experiences with their children and being grown-ups. One of them outed Cowser and Grayson Rodriguez as needing to keep them in line as being the young guys, and being, hey, don't do that. We don't do that in the big leagues. And teaching them about new ballparks and new cities. And I mean, I think that's one of the things, even like Rutschman's been around, it's got to be still 6 or 8 ballparks he hasn't played in yet, right? Like, and that's not to mention Cowser, who's new to the party, and like all these guys. And it is reminiscent of my youth, where I spent those parts of my years in those clubhouses with Ben McDonald and Mike Messina and Rick Sutcliffe and Chris Hoyles, whom you and I talked about at length 2 weeks ago, and just a lot of those kinds of players, as well as Johnny Oates and Elrod and Cal Sr. and Mike Flanagan, trying to keep younger guys in order and teach them the ropes, and Brady Anderson being a big leaguer and what all that entails. And it really peeled back the curtain. They're doing a digital thing. It's like their lounge, I guess, but they don't have a host on it. And I thought it was the same guys every time. I didn't realize like they're going to put different guys in these seats and give them situational conversation, which this is the antithesis of me being the old guy prick, telling them not to throw sunflower seeds at each other when they're doing it in the middle of the game, in the middle of the dugout, when they're trying to talk baseball and I'm trying to learn a little bit about them. But I really saw this leadership thing with Corbin Burns. It was a great conversation, Cologne, about their kids and seeing the game that way and what leadership would be. And then I think about these men who are having to go home to their wives, their family, they're getting cut on, they're letting their team down, their careers in jeopardy every time. And I have fallen in like with Bradish. He's one of the guys that I've seen more on TV, and they've I've seen him speak more, and he seems like a nice kid, and Means as well as being a leader, throwing a no hitter. Like the feelings we have with Mancini having cancer, it's not cancer, but it's cancer for their career to have to go through this, and it's an awful, painful. I'm watching my wife boot around here. 5 minutes before we did this segment, it sucks being in pain. It sucks having doctors in your life, but when you put your career in jeopardy, as I watched when it happened to Rob Burnett, when it happened to Todd Heap, and when it certainly happened to Dennis Pitta, whom you and I have a real affinity for, and we'll always have an affinity for. That these are it's a tragic situation, and we're thinking like, who are we going to trade for, and what player are we going to lose on the farm, and we'll get to all of that, but there really is a human part of this for these humans on Father's Day weekend to have their career jeopardized. Sucks, man. Sucks.
It really does. I mean, it's difficult, and this is why. And we've talked about this for years. Whenever there's an injury, we've talked about it a lot with football, right? Because injuries are so prevalent in a contact sport. You go far enough down the timeline, injury rate is 100%. I mean, that's just the truth. Everyone who plays football is going to get hurt, and when it comes to pitchers in baseball, just about everyone gets hurt. And we've talked about the prevalence of Tommy John, whether you're talking about youth baseball, high school baseball, college baseball, minor league baseball, or the major leagues. I mean, it's such an epidemic that is very, very difficult to try to navigate. And I don't think anyone has the perfect answers, obviously. That's an understatement. But there is a human element to this. That's why it's something that, as someone who's covered these guys and been around these guys enough, it's not as though reporters get to know all these players intimately. So I'll stress that. But there's a mental side to this that goes beyond just, okay, well, how many games are you going to miss? How many weeks are you going to miss? Or, are you going to miss a season? Whatever. But that player tends to go away then, right? I mean, and even the teams themselves have to acknowledge that the wheel keeps moving. I mean, you don't stop, right? I mean, we're going to be talking more and more about Cade Povich. We're going to be talking more and more about Dean Kramer coming back from a rehab assignment. We're going to be talking about someone like Chase McDermott, who's at AAA and potentially could be in the mix. We're certainly going to be talking about the trade market, but it's very difficult. And I think for pitchers specifically, and we've talked about this, so we don't need to belabor the point too much, but we've talked about this element of everything that helps these guys get to this point. And we've talked about it so much with modern day pitching and the philosophy behind it and max effort and guys going to training facilities like Driveline and all these different facilities around the country and all this, specialized, personalized coaching to add 2 or 3 miles per hour on your fastball, to add more vertical and horizontal break on your breaking balls. All of that helps you get to a certain point, that helps you reach a certain level of success, also is what's going to contribute to your downfall at some point in time. And I don't say that to be fatalistic, but the numbers are the numbers in terms of the degree and percentage of pitchers that have UCL injuries and have to undergo Tommy John surgery or UCL surgery with internal brace, all the different, kinds of surgeries that we're starting to see now as it pertains to the elbow, let alone even talking about, if you have a rotator cuff injury or something like that. So it is very difficult. It is something that I don't begrudge fans this, but there's just such this automatic reflex to just say, next man up, next man up, next man up. It is a human being there. And that's why I continued to stress during the spring training that, how dare anyone just tell a pitcher, oh, go get your elbow cut on. That even though it's a guaranteed 12 to 14 month or 12 to 16 month recovery, and there's no guarantee that you're not going to be like John Means, who comes back and makes 8 total starts late last year and early this season, and then he has to get it again.
Hey,
So,
dude, how long's my
I mean, it's
back been
tough.
out?
It really
Three,
is.
three
And I
years,
think
man, right? So for me, my back's been 3 years. I was told a year and a half ago I needed to be cut on by 3 different surgeons, that I have this L3, L4, like real situation in my life. I have chosen for a year and a half to sort of put it off, try to work myself through it. Before this segment, I was on the floor stretching. Thank you to Planet Fitness for trying to take care of me and all my yoga people. But like, I'm putting it would completely F my life up, my work, my this, my that, my recovery. I have Dr. Steve, like everything I do. So like I'm but if my work dictated that I had to do it right now, I'd have to go do it, right? If I had to go play sports, if I were an athlete trying to play golf or tennis and I were 30 years younger, like it's an amazing thing that any of us would try to, when you get a toothache, not go to the dentist, right? Like, so, but it is funny with sports fans that you just think they're going to come back and they're robots. And that's the part that, by the way, the other player was Kimbrel. And as being the leadership council and all of this, that these veteran guys watch these young guys go through this, and they've been watching this. It's like, I don't want to make the war reference or whatever, but it's like being off with a troop where you go off and you all think you're going to be happy and millionaires. You're all going to make the big leagues. You're all going to win. You're all going to marry the pretty girl and you throw the ball over the moon and do all of that stuff. And then the real, like for these veteran guys, they've seen this road. But in this organization, in this clubhouse, in the last 10 months, with the promise of winning a World Series, like that brass ring sitting there and they're going to Yankee Stadium, man, it's Mike Elias, hats off to you if you can win a World Series with this. I mean, because this is hard to do. And this would be tragic in any other organization. I mean, you just lost your best pitcher from last year.
Yeah, I mean it's not easy, and again, it was a roller coaster over these last 4 months. I think of mid-February, everyone assumed Kyle Bradish wasn't going to pitch this year, and then it's like, okay, he comes back, and then he looks like Kyle Bradish, even slightly better than he was last year. I mean, the strikeout rate was even better this year. I mean, just to tell you how crazy this was, and I do wonder if there was something to this. In the first inning of Friday night's game, he struck out Bryce Harper. It was the fastest pitch of Kyle Bradish's career. Now, was he a little too amped up? And maybe I don't want to speculate about it too much. We knew he had a UCL injury back in January and February. It's not like that magically, a ligament doesn't just completely fix itself, right? I mean, you're talking about, it's like a rubber band. If there's a slight stretch or slight tear to a rubber band, it might still work for a while, but that doesn't mean that it's going to go back to how it was. So I don't know. I mean, again, it was this have not feeling as far as with Kyle Bradish. So I don't want to completely make this out to be that it's completely changed their trajectory, because I think there was very much a sense, and you and I even talked about it last week. I think you even said, are we betting on Kyle Bradish being there in August, September, and October? And I didn't want to bet for or against. I certainly don't want to bet against a player when you're talking about his livelihood.
Well, you would talk about him in
do
terms
it.
of being
But
in
there
that
was,
October rotation, and I was always a little skeptical.
well, I mean, you're always going to be I mean, look, no one's a mind reader. No one has an orange crystal ball here. I mean, for me, it's a matter of wanting to be respectful to the player's livelihood and saying, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm going to bet, bet $1 on whether he's there or not. I don't want to do that, but I know the same thing that anyone else knows when you're talking about UCLs. And for every pitcher, like a Tanaka, like Aaron Nola years ago, or whoever, I mean, for every guy that can avoid surgery when there's a UCL issue of some meaningful degree, we know there are many, many more that are ultimately going to have surgery, whether you try to rehab it and come back or whether you avoid it for a year or two or not. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
This is the same thing you said the morning after it happened back in February. Like literally, that was your framing of it, and now here we are.
Yeah. So, and look, I already saw some of this on social media again. Okay. Yeah. Could Kyle Bradish have undergone Tommy John surgery back in March? If they just decided, oh, okay, this isn't going to work. Maybe they got a different doctor's opinion. Could he have undergone surgery then? Sure. But again, John Means is a great example of, you don't just make a hasty decision to get cut on, because now, and look, John Means had, his injury, they didn't even dispute it, right? I mean, when he had that two and a half years ago at this point, not even 2.5 years, what, going on 26 months at this point, when he had Tommy John surgery in late April of 22, it wasn't one of those that was borderline. They needed to get it done, but we see how that's worked. And I don't say that to mean that Kyle Bradish is doomed or any other pitcher that has to get it is doomed. It just means it's not 100%. I've heard some people characterize Tommy John over the last 10 years as, it's almost like getting a tune-up for your arm. No, that is such a flippant. I don't want to say insensitive because it's baseball at the end of the day, but that's not what it is. It's a major surgery. So if you can avoid major surgery and do something in a more conservative way, and 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 doctors deem you a candidate to try to do it that way, I can't blame a player for saying no. I don't want to just make a deliberate decision to sacrifice the next 16 months of my
I mean,
career
these are
when I
personal
haven't made any
decisions,
money
man.
yet.
You know what I
So
mean? Like literally, like my back
exactly,
is a personal
exactly.
decision for me, right? Like, and I really appreciate that I certainly wouldn't want to be making that for other guys with their livelihoods. But there's something even with
Right.
football. DeMar Hamlin, and I don't want to say aside or CTE because we talk about all of these very serious issues with football, but we get knee scum. I mean, John Harbaugh talked about Marlon Humphrey's thing the other day as though if it were you or me, it wouldn't just be a bag of donuts. You know what I mean? For any of these small procedures or scope. My wife's on crutches right now. It's not a small thing. It's not a small thing for their spouse, for their children, for the trainer, for their teammates, for their psychology, for their agents, for any of it. It sucks. And, on top of all of that, there is the thing we'll get back to, which is who's going to pitch. That's where we move on. We'll
Yeah.
move on from Bradish. He'll be gone. We were talking about him last week as 1, 2, 3 in the rotation. Now that's over. Now you and I have to cut and say, all right, let's do sports radio, Luke, and move on from it because that's what we do. And that's unfortunate. And I guess the human part of Father's Day and them having Kimbrel and Colomb and McCann, they're little boys and they're little girls, and the leadership part, which is what struck me, which I guess will transition the conversation. Luke Jones is here. He's Baltimore Luke. You can find him out on the interwebs. You can find us together at Costas on Thursday. Obviously, Orioles Yankees going to be going all week here. We're doing the crab cake tour over there. The part for me where the pitching, and now we're going to discuss Kramer. We're going to talk about Povich. We're going to talk about Irvin. We're going to talk about what they have as they go to Yankee Stadium. The season starts to teeter when you start to take these starts away, start taking innings away, and start stacking up bullpen. And what do they do now? I guess that's what do they do now? What's Mike Elias's next card trick here?
Yeah. I mean, look, let's also be clear. The other guys have pitched pretty well. I mean, Cole Irvin has been one of the unsung heroes of 2024. Cade Povich, first start in Toronto wasn't very good. Second start against Atlanta was fantastic. I want to see hopefully more of that. But obviously, so much focus is going to be on the trade market, and understandably so. I think it's complicated by the fact of go look at the wild card races in the respective leagues, and you tell me who are definitive buyers and who are definitive sellers. The definitive sellers, okay, the White Sox, sure. The Marlins, sure. The Rockies, sure. But are the Rangers going to sell in the AL? Are the Rays going to sell? Are the Red Sox going to sell? Are the Astros going to sell? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you look at some of those teams, and
Somebody is,
by
though.
where
I
they
mean,
stand
somebody's going to fade,
record-wise,
right?
you would think some of those teams would be sellers, but we know some of those teams. Oh, of course. I mean, there will be that, but my point is projecting that in mid-June is not easy. So if you're Mike Elias, you're trying to manage all of that as much as you can, but in the interim, and you don't want to make a move just for the sake of doing that. That's when you end up giving up a really good prospect for someone that's not moving the needle that much for you. But in the meantime, they're going to be evaluating Cade Povich even more now. I mean, it's great to hear these comparisons with Max Fried of the Atlanta Braves. I mean, and by the way, Drew French, their pitching coach, even made a comparison on Sunday morning as we were talking to him just outside the Orioles clubhouse. So there's some excitement about Cade Povich. There really is. That said, it's grounded understanding that's not the same thing as penciling in a healthy Kyle Bradish as your number 2 starter, and then Grayson Rodriguez slots into your number 3 spot for an October rotation. But look, again, there was always an unknown there. There was always, no one was sitting here. And when we were talking about it, my line as I was writing about Burns, Bradish, Rodriguez was, can you find a way to get these guys to October healthy? And then Kyle Bradish, his arm's hurting him the next start. So that's the nature of the beast, right? I mean, the Yankees haven't had Garrett Cole, their Cy Young Award winner, for the entire year, and it speaks to how impressive they've been and how good their rotation is. But if you're the Orioles right now, the good news is this stretch of, what was it, 45 days or 47 days where they played on 45 of those, or 44 of those where they had so few off days, that we are down to the last couple weeks of that. Into July, they'll have more regular off days, so you can go back to a 5-man rotation, because they have a 5-man rotation right now, at least until Dean Kramer's ready to come back, which I'm guessing he's going to get at least one more rehab start, I would assume, and then we'll have a conversation about him. But I mean, Albert Suarez has a 1.6 ERA right now. Cole Irvin has a 3.03. Cade Povich is at 4.76, but we know how good his second start was. I'm not saying that they're going to stand pat. Let me be very clear. I am not at all suggesting that. At the same time, as you are trying to figure out, if you're Mike Elias, as you're trying to figure out whatever this trade market's going to look like in terms of who are the true sellers, you've got to evaluate these options. I mean, they did this with Grayson Rodriguez last year, if you recall. Rodriguez came back from the minor leagues right out of the All-Star break, and what did he do? He pitched really well to the point where they got to the deadline and said, Grayson's going to be one of our guys, and he might be one of our top 3, or he might be a top 2 before it's all said and done. And it was, regardless of how it went against the Rangers last October. So there's all of that going on. I'll remind everyone, for all of the angst about the Orioles pitching, go look at the numbers, rotation and bullpen. I'm not saying that there isn't room for improvement, but we knew all along that Kyle Bradish was a maybe in terms of his health. So I'm not going to sit here and say that doesn't change anything, because that would be ridiculous. I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna here. At the same time, you knew that this was a very distinct possibility. So you're going to evaluate these other guys. You still have a heck of a ball club, and we saw that Saturday and Sunday with the way that Grayson Rodriguez and Corbin Burns handled their business against the best team in the National League. But yeah, they're going to have to evaluate this thing. And is there a pitcher out there that can be your number 3 starter in a postseason series? If there is, how much is it going to cost to get that guy in terms of capital, in terms of salary, all the different factors there? Or is it a case of you acquire someone that might not be your number 3, but is at least going to give you very dependable innings in the way that a Kyle Gibson did last year, and the way that Jordan Lyles did the year before that? To me, that's probably the lowest. That's the bottom as far as your range of outcomes. I think you're going to need a pitcher to do that at the very least, even if Cade Povich proves to be a rookie sensation in the second half of the season, which, I don't know if he's going to do that, but they like him. They're definitely impressed with him. There's optimism about him, but it's not going to be Kyle Bradish. That's Kyle Bradish was one of the best pitchers in the American League last year, and was looking that way again this year. But we also knew there was an elbow issue here, and we knew that it's one thing to have PRP injection, go through a 2-month throwing progression, go through the minor leagues, make 6 or 7 starts, but then you get into the grind, and you're facing the best team in baseball on a Friday night, and you're completely jazzed up and jacked up and throwing the ball harder than you ever have. Did he, quote, injure himself there, or was it just an inevitable thing that was going to happen? I don't know, but long story short, he's not available. We assume he's not. The assumption now is you don't expect him to pitch the rest of the year. And whether that means Tommy John or eventually Tommy John or whatever, I think it's, now you're in a position of evaluating the other guys. And Mike Elias feels more and more likely that, yes, if you want to put your best foot forward and give your team the absolute best chance to win this division, but more importantly, just put yourself in position for October, whether that's as a division winner or a wild card, because they're going to be look how many games over, or 23 games over 500 in mid-June. They're going to be in the playoffs, regardless of whether it's division or wild card. So what can you do? What move is out there? Is there a starting pitcher out there that, for me, what I'm looking at, is there a guy out there that has an additional year or 2 of club control that you can acquire? Someone that's not a rental, or maybe not even someone that's a free agent after next year, because Who knows what's going to happen with Corbin Burns? We've talked about that, and we'll
By the
continue
way,
to talk about
I
that.
must say this to you after the start on Sunday, right out in the middle of my Facebook page. These people that are baseball fans. Rubenstein's got to find a way to keep Corbin Burns here. That's what a fan would say. You got to find a way. I don't know what I would do with that from a phone call perspective. Someone to give it to you. Mr. Jones, what are the chances of the Orioles re-signing Corbin Burns? How much would that cost?
Well, it's going to cost a lot. I will say this, and this is just a general approach to roster building. You should not change your valuation on a player based off of someone else, what happens with someone else, right? Eric DaCosta would tell you that. This is a $5 million football player. Just because someone else gets hurt or someone else retires or someone else leaves in free agency, if you still feel that's a $5 million football player, it's a $5 million football player.
Except
doesn't mean
for
you should
Odell
just...
Beckham Jr., except for him.
Well, yeah, sure.
Hey, okay, dude. I just gave it to you.
Well, that was such an odd set of circumstances with Lamar and all that. But the point I'm making is, however you felt about Corbin Burns on Thursday or Friday afternoon, just because Kyle Bradish goes down with an injury, that, again, we all knew that this was a possibility. Whether even the most optimistic on Kyle Bradish, no one was just making an assumption that he was just going to be fine forever, right? I mean, we knew that this was possible. So I would say, and I'm not 100% opposed to it, but realize and recognize how much money it's going to cost. This is not the NFL. This is all guaranteed money. This is a very long-term investment, presumably. And what happened with Kyle Bradish could just as easily happen with Corbin Burns at some point in time, whether it's later this year, next year, the year after that, whatever it is. I don't say that to completely dismiss any free agent contracts for pitchers, but boy, that is very treacherous ground you're walking on when you're talking about giving that kind of money to a position or to a pitcher as opposed to a position player. I mean, you tell me right now, the Orioles are willing to give Gunnar Henderson and he's willing to sign a 12 million or not 12 million, a 12-year deal for whatever we're talking high 9 digits, right? I mean, it's not going to be 12 years for $90 million. This is going to be something that would be insane. I'm much more keen to sign off on that and say sold. But if you're talking about a starting pitcher, as great as Corbin Burns is,
$400 million, $500 million for Henderson.
I mean, it's not going to be $500 million, but it's going to be, I mean, this isn't 5 years, $125 million. It's significantly more than that. So there's also the understanding that whatever that money is, you do the math. There's probably a good likelihood that he's going to miss time during that, whether it's because of Tommy John or, I mean, it's tough. And for me to sit here and say that that's going to be the best possible investment you can make, I'd have to see exactly what the numbers are, but
so will Mr. Rubenstein, by the way, and Mr. Arrighetti.
A thought exercise for anyone that's clamoring for that. And look, I'm not discrediting anyone that's wants to do that. I'm not saying that there's not a path for that in some world, but right now, go look at the 10 most expensive pitching contracts in baseball and go look at how many of those guys are hurt right now. And I'm just saying, everyone thinks their guy's different. Same thing that happens with signing running backs in football. And look, pitchers are starting pitching is way more valuable than a running back is to their offense. When we've talked about that, you and I just spent an hour talking about Derrick Henry recently. And so much of that was not about Derrick Henry. It was the valuation of the position. But you just look at that and for every time you say, our guy's different, our guy's durable, our guy doesn't get hurt, our guy throws 200 innings every year, everyone's durable until they're not anymore.
Well, hey, the Yankees are waiting on Garrett Cole Wednesday night, right?
Correct. And by the way, I mean, the Yankees, look at what Luis Gil's done for them. And I would say if I'm the Orioles, I'm much more keen on go develop your next Kyle Bradish. Go get your next Kyle Bradish who they got from the Angels in the Dylan Bundy trade, right? Go draft your next Grayson Rodriguez. You need to develop. And maybe the point of emphasis for the Orioles needs to become more on the pitching side. And we've seen that swing a little bit with their drafts the last year or two. Remember, it was very college hitter heavy for the the first 3-4 drafts.
Well, that's shown up.
It has, but at the same time, you need pitchers too,
Better
right?
hope that
So
shows up in the Bronx this week.
no doubt, no doubt. So I mean, look, I love watching Corbin Burnes pitch, but I also recognize how much money that's going to cost. How that's a guarantee. He's also, he's not 26
Somebody
years
else is going
old.
to figure it out. Somebody else is going to give him money, I guess,
Oh,
right?
sure.
Yankees, Dodgers,
Oh,
Phillies. I don't know. You tell
someone
me.
will, but at the same time, go look at the Texas Rangers right now. You remember how much money they gave Jacob deGrom?
Oh,
How
I
many
know.
how many starts has he made for them? And look, I'm not saying this to be so risk adverse that you never, ever, ever sign a starting pitcher, but boy, I know that the Orioles also have some players that are currently on their roster that if you're going to be talking about giving out $200 million contracts,
They got a couple guys in line.
I'd much rather give it to those guys and then take my chances in terms of trading for my next Corbin Burnes or drafting and developing my next Corbin Burnes. That's all I'm saying here. Tread very carefully talking
Or
about
get
that.
innings out of Cole Irvin, like, sub 2
Sure.
ERA innings out of,
And let's be clear, Cole Irvin's not going to be, he's not going to
Well,
be their
playing
game one
defense
starter.
behind
But
them matters too. And, the catcher matters and
yeah,
the ballpark matters. Jim Palmer has started calling it the Great Wall of Baltimore,
yeah.
amongst other things. All right, so Luke Jones and I are here. We're talking a little pitching here. We got baseball all week. We got all sorts of things going on. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour is coming to Costas, which is why I'm wearing the Costas shirt today. On Thursday, we'll be there before the Orioles-Yankees game. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We'll have the Gold Rush 7 doublers to give away. We were at Coco's last week. We were at Cooper's. You'll hear the conversations with Ron Furman and Tom Pierce from Classic 5 and Rasig and Max Weiss, and just had a great time last week. We're going to have a great time this week. We're going to be at Pappas in Parkville next Tuesday as well. I'm welcome to a whole bunch. John Patty, OBAL, stopping by. Chris Emery's coming by. I'm trying to drag Jamie Costello out. You were talking about pitching and the arm and all and max effort. I was at Costello's party the other night, and Dave Johnson was there. And no one, he won't admit this, but we really like each other, Dave Johnson and I. So all these years later, East Side guys sticking together, I always say he's the one guy that has never given me up, has never had to unfriend me, unlink me. Dave Johnson's and he would appreciate this. If Ekman were here, he'd say, at Dave Johnson, he's a right guy. He's a right guy. So, but we were talking about max effort, and he's like, I never pitched like that. And he's got a sense of humor about his whole cocktail speech about, when my fastball reared out at 88, in 88, so like he's got all that going on, but he's like, I didn't throw every pitch 88. I would have blown my arm out. He's like, even though 88 was a lot for me, every pitch at 88, I would have blown my arm out before I did, and his boy pitched, right? So, I mean, it's no one knows more about pitching or spent his life more around arms and elbows and pitching than him, and then doing it with his kid, trying to get his kid to the big leagues. And they weren't 6'5" and these towering specimens. They were artists. When you pitch at that level, they're not doing what Felix Bautista was doing last year. And then there's Garrett Cole coming back this week. And the actual matchups we have here with the Yankees this week, I mean, we can cry the blues about what happened last week or even talk about the Phillies fans and like all that. Man, it's sort of next game up. And these are the most important games they're going to play all summer, and certainly pitching.
No question about it. I mean, they're not the end all be all, but yeah, these games are worth more. There's no doubt about that. I mean, even when I was talking to you about this in late April and May when the Yankees came in, I recognize that the head-to-heads are important. Yes, of course. Captain Obvious statement there, but I'll say this much. When you look at the pitching matchups on paper, yeah, the Yankees are favored. Yeah, the Yankees are at home, but the Orioles lineup hit 4 home runs against Zach Wheeler on Sunday. I mean, we know that they're capable of beating anybody on any given night, but this is going to be quite a test. I mean, Albert Suarez has been such a great story. How's he look against the Yankees? Pitching in the Bronx. Cade Povich, fantastic against the Braves. Again, grounded optimism, but optimism nonetheless as far as how he looks and what he can potentially do. And just, Drew French, their pitching coach, talked about it. Mature beyond his years. That's what he said about Cade Povich. So how does he handle that environment? Cole Irvin, can he continue to do what he's done, which has just been such an unsung hero? I mean, I guess at some point we keep saying unsung hero. You're not unsung anymore, right? But he's just been so huge for them. And whether it's rotation or coming out of the bullpen as he was for a piece of time
Or
not
helping
that
with
long
dogs and
ago.
cats, which I appreciate. So there.
Sure. So, but this is a big test. And these 3 games, I mean, look, you see what the standings are. I mean, the Orioles entered this series tied in the loss column with the Yankees. So any outcome here is not going to decide the division, in late June, right? You're you get swept, you sweep them, you win 2 out of 3, you lose 2 out of 3. That none of those are season defining at this point in time. But these head to heads, knowing that you don't play 19 times head to head like you did a few years ago, so yeah, it's a little more
You want to
magnified.
be
So
one up, not one down Thursday night. That's it. When you and
yeah,
I
you'd like to
leave the
be.
bar at Costas around 6:45, you just want to not just have a great meal and a great crab soup. You go 50-50, however you want to do it. I mean, I would, if I were you, I would go with the crab imperial, and I would definitely get the cream spinach. Maybe a little bit of rice on the side there too, but delicious. You want to be, 2-1. And the 3-0 is nice, but can't be 0-3. Don't really want to be 1-2, but you would, lick your wounds. But you just want to hold your own, literally, against them up there in that environment after the environment you had here. Because these big environments, we talked so much last year about Rodriguez going down to Arlington and what big stadiums felt like. And you and I talked in August and September. They hadn't seen a lot of that. Seeing more of that now. And I don't know how full it'll be at Yankee Stadium because it's a lot of things to do in New York on a summer night in June. Trust me. But it'll be vibrant, I would think.
Yeah, no question about it. And I mean, this even goes back to, I mean, look at the weekend. How many Phillies fans were there on Friday? And the Orioles lost that game. And this goes back to what Brandon Hyde said. They handled that environment really well. I mean, that could have been jarring to them to see that kind of a takeover for your ballpark. Not that it was 80-20 Phillies, but I mean, it was 50-50. And on Friday night, if you had told me there were more Phillies fans there than Orioles fans, if you told me it was a 52-48 split or something like that, I wouldn't have denied it. But
By the way, it's a $60
they had,
get-in in New York on Tuesday night, about $50 on Wednesday, Thursday afternoon games light. It's going to be about 35 bucks to get in. Dude, Yankees games sometimes could be 6, 8, $10. I mean, empty seats.
yeah,
This is
and it's
they've got a real
weeknight
thing
games.
going on, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weeknight games. So, I mean, this is going to be big, but at the same time, like the point I was just trying to make, the Orioles handled that environment over the weekend very well. They could have been a little, I don't say this in the sense that they're going to be disparaging the fans, but how would you react if your home ballpark suddenly has 23,000 opposing fans in it cheering? That could mess with your head a little bit just as a competitor. They handled it very well. They handled that. To me, what we saw over the weekend was some growth from maybe what they lacked last October. And I'm not,
Composure? Is that the word you want
yeah,
to use? Yeah.
in a big game, in a big series. I mean, maybe. Again, I want to stress mid-June is not postseason baseball, but it's as close, like what we saw this weekend was as close as it gets to being postseason without it being postseason in terms of atmosphere. So, they handle that well. Let's see how they handle it in the Bronx. I mean, it's going to be another learning experience for some of these guys. Keep in mind, Colton Cowser didn't play, wasn't even on the roster in the postseason last year. I mean, we already mentioned Cade Povich. How's that going to look? How's he going to handle the Yankees lineup? I mean, the Braves were really scuffling offensively. I'll say that in fairness. So how's he handle it? So this will be good for them. I mean, as I said about the Philly series, regardless of outcome, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun going up there and seeing how they do. But even if the worst case scenario happens and you get swept, they're not out of the division race. I mean, they're a game and a half out going into this series. I mean, worst case scenario, division race is far from over. So try to handle your business. Try to win 2 out of 3. If you can do that, awesome. You do that, you leave the Bronx, you'll be a half game out. That sounds great, right? Especially considering losing Kyle Bradish and John Means and losing Tyler Wells, wherever Tyler Wells is going to fit in. I still think that would have been bullpen long term, but they're still have a lot of really good baseball players on this team, and they still have pitchers who have done really well for them. So we'll talk about the trade deadline. We'll talk about that a lot. That's going to be a major topic of conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned the bullpen guys he's got to get. We're getting there. They're talking about like replacing
Yeah.
Bradish. The bullpen was a problem to begin with. So,
I mean, even one of the names that surfaced over the weekend that the Orioles were one of the teams linked to, Tanner Scott. old friend Tanner Scott, who the Orioles traded away a couple years ago. And I don't know if he's the guy. I'm not saying he's the answer, but that's just one of many names that we're going to hear the Orioles linked to. They are going to be linked to just about anyone, whether it's something that has real footing or whether it's more conjecture than anything else, because the Orioles have needs and they have the prospects to go get guys. So in the meantime, this is still a heck of a baseball team, even with the disappointing news of Bradish. I mean, they really are. And give this team credit. They're not going to fall apart just because of Kyle Bradish by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly the microscope is on Mike Elias more and more here to make a move at some point. I've said it all along. Doesn't have to be tomorrow. Doesn't even have to be next week, but it's feeling more and more inevitable that, yeah, if you want to really put your best foot forward in terms of not just getting to October, that's not the issue here. It's positioning yourself to do something really meaningful in October. There are going to be a couple moves that have to be made. And I think Mike Elias realizes that at this point. It's just a matter of going out and doing that and wanting to make the best possible move, not the first possible move.
An arms race, as it were. Orioles versus Yankees in the Bronx. Luke and I will be monitoring all that out on the social medias. We will be together at Costas on Thursday doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping our water clean, as well as Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, keeping our car out on the road. We're going to at least evaluate some offense as we get to the Bronx as well. Lots and lots of guests this week. Mark Bryan from Hootie and the Blowfish, my friend Thomas Dolby have joined us on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Lots of conversations I haven't had room for because we've had so much baseball, so much Fleet Week, so many things going on around here. Even some political talk with Damien O'Doherty from over Coco's last week, and a great movies and music segment with Max Weiss, editor-in-chief of Baltimore Magazine, and my old pal Alan McCallum coming together. So really good stuff here. Bright conversations, lots of baseball. Orioles in the Bronx, Crab Cake Tour at Costas. Next week, we're at Pappas on Tuesday. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.